no. Why a new shot?
Just come in behind us. There you go. There you go.
Okay, my name is Corey Wyman. Thank you for coming to the Cardinal Gallery. I'm a co-owner of the Cardinal Gallery with my wife, Chelsea Hume. We opened up about 2.5 years ago. We're a fine art photo gallery in Toronto. My wife works as a producer, I work as a cinematographer. And we felt that there was a shortage of fine art galleries in Toronto, specifically for photography. So we pretty much retired and opened up this gallery 7 days before COVID. But here we are. We're very photo specific, and Bob approached us about 6 months ago about this show, and Chelsea and I really love alternative processing. And when Bob approached us and then suggested or mentioned that Melissa was going to be curating, we're like, perfect, we're sold. So, but it was a touch and go with COVID, and then eventually it landed. So we're extremely happy to have these three artists, and we're extremely happy to have Melissa Ronlund curate this show, and at that point I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure and honor, and thank you, Corey and Chelsea, for not only welcoming me to add to the mix, but also this idea of having three artists co-exhibiting, I think is very exciting and challenging, I think, in the space that we have. But I think it's you know, based on the smiles of the artists, I think it's all turned out quite well. Alchemy of Nature features recent work created using 19th century photographic processes that explore the natural environment, created by artists Diana Bloomfield, Bob Carney, and Christine Fitzgerald, and I'm going to introduce them individually in a moment. I think these three artists value the historical continuity of photography by reviving and adapting antiquated methods to create unique hand-printed physical objects, and by bringing back to life historical techniques from photography's past and exploiting modern technology. Their works link the past to the present and push the boundaries of their medium. So some housekeeping notes before I introduce our distinguished artist guests. So my plan is to moderate a roundtable discussion, and I will start with asking the artists some questions to cover some key aspects of their respective practices. Well, that's the plan. Having worked with artists before, I'm quite sure that this will move pretty quickly from a tidy structure to an organic, free-flowing discussion between the artists, but I would ask the audience maybe to hold your questions through to the end so that we can pick up on the specific threads and keep the conversation going until then. And we're recording today's conversation for posting on the gallery website as a complement to the installation, but we've arranged so that the audience members are not appearing on camera, but your questions may be recorded on audio after. So I'll start with you, Diana. Diana is a North Carolina-based artist and instructor. She's exhibited widely in North America and internationally. In 2021, she was honored with the prestigious Rofofolio Denis Roussel Award. And my question to you is, how did you first become aware of gum bichromate printing and deciding to weave that into your artistic practice?
Okay. Well, first, let me just say I'm really thrilled to be here. I want to thank Chelsea and Corey for having me and framing my work. It all looks so beautiful. And a big thank you to Melissa. I love what you wrote about my work. And everybody seems tireless. I was far away, so it was just sort of like, yeah, I didn't have to do any heavy lifting. And big thanks to Bob for inviting me in the first place. And I love showing with both Bob and Christine. As far as gum printing, I started out, anybody my age who started in photography, it started out as a silver gelatin printer, and I never liked working in the darkroom, which could have been a real career killer right there. But I just hated everything about it. So I was in a gallery in New York, and I saw some work on the wall that was just breathtaking. And I asked the gallery owner, or the director, what I was looking at, and she said, oh, these are platinum prints. So I didn't know anything about them, and I just thought they were spectacular. And she talked to me for 30 or 40 minutes, and the only thing I got out of that really was, and this can be done in ambient light. So I was sold. I did not care. So I went home and I really started working, teaching myself platinum printing. Eventually got to take a workshop, which helped. But then I sort of got tired of, the monochrome look. So I'd always wanted to do gum printing. I didn't really know anything about it. I just had seen them before, and I really wanted to do it. So I was able to take a gum over platinum workshop, and then when I got home, I realized, oh, I really want to know how to do tricolored gum. I just wanted color in my work, because, I'd gone from platinum to cyanotype over platinum, and I just wanted more color. And I loved working with papers. I loved the whole idea of it, and spreading those layers. And it felt very, and it still feels, it's the only process I've ever done where it has not bored the living daylights out of me. So it's just, the creative possibilities are endless, really. And so I taught myself with a lot of help from friends, and it took me a good year to come up with an image, really, a print that looked like something recognizable. And so I've been doing it like 15 years now, I guess, and I love everything about it. And again, it's the creative possibilities that are so. I think sometimes when you look at a platinum print or even a cyanotype print, people know what that's supposed to look like, and there are certain tones that you're supposed to achieve. With the gum printing, it's really very personal and very interpretive, and nobody can really ever say that's incorrect, which always worried that people are judging me. I like that about it too. So.
Well, I like that it unfolds over time. I mean, I think at the time that you came up in photography, the ethos was still very much the decisive moment, create the work within the parameters of the frame. And all three of you share a dedication really to the objectness, the materiality of what it is that you're working on.
Yeah, I think for me too, I always felt when I was doing silver gelatin or whatever, I always felt like the image ended as soon as I took the picture. That was done, the printing was just drudgery. And with this, I realized that no, it's really all in the printing.
And you've shared a lot of your recipes and techniques online, which is great that you're very generous in sharing outward that technical information. I now have a question for Bob. Alongside his own photographic practice, Toronto-based artist and printer Bob Carney has earned an international reputation for printing traditional and digital fine art. Next year, in 2023, you are marking 50 years contributing to the art and science of Canadian and international photography, and I do hope that there will be much fanfare, as so many artists and museums have depended on you for your fine printing. And we can speak a bit more on the technical side in a bit. Can you cast your mind back to your first awareness of photography as a creative art? How did you get turned on, so to speak?
Oh, well, I think the story is probably pretty similar to many people. I went to a college for photography, and I really had no experience whatsoever. And when I saw our instructor, Arnim Walters, expose a sheet of paper to a negative through light, I thought it was magic. And I know a lot of people say that, but for me it was magic. And today, I think Anam and I saw magic again today, didn't we, Anam? We saw the print emerge. So for me, I was sold in 1973 that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
What a conversion.
It was.
But did you play around with cameras before that,
No,
or you weren't
no.
interested?
One of those little Instamatics.
Right.
That's all I applied. I was a high lead logger, which is on Vancouver Island. I worked in Vancouver Island, And I realized I didn't want to be a high-lead logger for the rest of my life. So I applied to a school in my hometown of London, Ontario, and I applied for cooking, business, and photography. And because they thought I was from Vancouver, I got accepted. In those days, if you were from out of province, you would get in almost automatically.
Oh, interesting.
And when I got there, they tried to get me out because they realized I knew nothing. Yeah, I kind of slid underneath the radar. But I have to say, seeing that image emerge was it for me.
And that's really the alchemy, isn't it? I mean, we're going to talk about that in a bit, but this idea of the kind of magical, almost mysterious transformation that happens in the dark room or can happen while you're working by hand over a print that you've made. It is transformative.
Like Diana mentioned, I was a silver printer for many years. That's where I started. I started in color printing, and then I moved to silver printing, and I started a business strictly on silver gelatin printing, and I kept on trying to do multiple color, like Diana mentioned, she loves color, and I love color as well. And in silver gelatin, I was doing quad tone toning, but I could never get the results. So that's when I started this quest of, well, how do I add color to a permanent image? And it went from carbon transfer process. I didn't like that process. It was too technical. It was too finicky. And then when I started realizing that gum over palladium, I was sold. And once again, you could do it in daylight. But I still do both. I still do silver and I still do palladium, but I do gum over every palladium. I'll never make a single palladium. It's got to be gum over.
And you've also been instrumental in training up other people and sharing your technical skills.
Well, that goes back to my training, and some of the best labs in the world were in Toronto. And it goes back to a technician would be working at a lab, and all of a sudden Kodak, Fuji, Agfa, and Ilford would send their creative geniuses into our labs, and we would be trained by these people. So I was trained by a lot of very brilliant people that gave the information openly, and I think you have to give that back. And I found that the more that you give back to the community, the more you get. So I love the training part of it. I don't like group training, I like singular training, but
like a true apprenticeship in a sense.
well, I have 2 young women that work for me right now, and they're going through the drill. I've trained other people to print, but it's not an easy session. I really make the people work hard, but I think it's worthwhile.
Christine. Based artist Christine Fitzgerald entwines the exploration of revived photographic methods with modern digital technologies to invite reflection on themes of time, precarity, and loss. Christine's work has been recognized through numerous awards, including being selected as the Fine Art Photographer of the Year by the International Photography Awards in New York City in 2016. And more recently, she was featured among the top wet plate collodion photographers in the world to watch, nominated by Analog Forever magazine. You've had a very full and successful career in another field before studying photography at the School for Photographic Art in Ottawa. And you've very quickly gained attention and notice as an artist integrating historical processes with modern technology. How did you come to be interested in historical photography?
Thanks, Melissa. I came from a health research background, and so I came to photography late in life. I was an art collector, though. And then one day, my husband gave me a camera for Christmas, and I became obsessed. I taught myself, and they say if you do something for 10,000 hours, you're not bad. So that's true. So I took photos, 5 hours a day for 3 years, every day, Christmas, and exhausted what you could learn from the internet. And then I decided that I had to go back to the origins of photography. And so I went to the School of Photographic Arts in Ottawa for 2 years. And my second month there, I opened a photography book, and it was by Sally Mann, a famous American photographer, and I was captivated by her images and had to learn everything about how she created them. And that's when I found out that she, created a lot of her image from glass plates that she created from wet collodion, using large box cameras. And so that's my second month, that's what I wanted to do. And so I put in the 10,000 hours into glass plates and metal plates, and traveled with a dark room in the back of my car, and pop-up tents, and did that for a few years, and finished the program. And but then I thought I wanted to do, I'm sure Bob and Diana are the same. You get these ideas all the time for projects, and you park them in your brain till you have time to do them. So there's a huge backlog of potential project. And so I wanted to, it was time to do this project that I had in the back of my head on these abandoned parrots. And it had to be in color. Like, I couldn't do, long exposures of live parrots. That won't work. So I went to one of the best. I have two of the best here next to me, but I went to the one in Canada. I went to Bob Carney, and he taught me how to apply color using gumbichromate to create my images for my project. And he put me through the drills, and anyhow, but then it was kind of interesting, the evolution, because you learn all these historical processes, and you already know about the modern technology, and so then it becomes really fun because you start combining them, and that's when the real fun starts. But you have to kind of put your mileage in. I always say I have to put the mileage in, because you have to become really, really proficient in one of the methods if you're going to start fooling around with it, And so you have to, and deep down if you've reached that level or not. And if not, Bob will tell you, or Diana will tell you. So now I've played around with combining, platinum and palladium with gumbichromate, and with some overlays of some distressed wet collodion plates. But now I'm starting to play around with some daguerreotypes, so just to make it really interesting. If it wasn't hard enough. So that's, it's an evolution.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Bob or Diana would say, but you're never really good. You always want to get better at it. You're always learning. Every day you learn something. And some days are bad days, and some days are good days, and you have some eureka moments, which are like amazing. But that's how I got to where I am today.
I love it.
Yeah.
And you're part of a sort of subgroup in a sense, and you have a nickname, I'm understanding. Maybe I shouldn't be giving out trade secrets, but aren't you called Gummers?
Are we?
I don't know.
Or, like,
I don't
you
want
have,
that
like,
name.
these secret
Yeah.
code names for the different kind of
They're so
niches
secret,
that
we're not
you're
gonna admit it.
We can't tell you. We'd have to kill you, Melissa.
Okay, all right, okay. No,
We'd
let's
have to
not do
kill
that.
Nobody is covered.
you. Yeah.
I wanted to address some of the subject matter of the various works that we have on display, and I'll start with you, Bob. This intensely personal series of photographs was taken during Bob's visit to his family's former retreat in the Muskokas over a 2-year period. And for me, each frame suggests an acutely felt experience of place, present and past, and a melancholic recognition of familiar terrain in every tree and shoreline, particularly this image just at the lower right here, I find very moving. These images form an archive imprinted with the feel of a long ago family album, and the muted tones of the gum bichromate and palladium historical processes intensify the pervading sense of a paradise both found and lost. Did you want to
Well-
speak to your experience and how you approached this whole project?
Okay, so this is for a lot of Canadians from southwestern Ontario. Muskoka is a place that we all like to go to. It's a cottage retreat. I don't know if the same is in North Carolina, but Muskoka is where we all go to. In Ottawa, you'd go to the Madawaska region, or maybe north of Ottawa. But for a lot of southwestern Ontarians, they go to Muskoka. So this is, my grandparents immigrated from Wales, and they bought a property I think in the 40s in Pine Lake, just outside of Gravenhurst, and built this property. So I spent every summer for 3 months, for at least 2 to 3 months with my grandmother at this place. So what you're seeing is 30 years after I went back with my wife, Laura and I, we went for a 2-year period, and I said to myself, this property is going to go. You know, family issues. I knew it was gone, so I wanted to document every single place. So this image that you like, that is where everybody would sit. And there would be, back in the day, 40 or 50 family members sitting watching the sunset come at us. So for me, I just wanted to get a piece of every place that I remember. So this image behind Christine, I actually planted some of those trees, you know, so I know that scene. And then there's a dock scene on the other side where, as a kid, when you wake up in the morning, what are you going to do? You're running down to the dock,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's where all the other cousins are going to be. And you run down, and as you run down the path, this is what you see. So that's kind of what this is all about. It's you know, I don't specialize in this work, but this is very personal to me.
And it's a new aspect, in a sense, of stepping out from the dark room, where you're facilitating, you're the handmaiden of others, of genius for others, and standing in your own voice,
Well,
speaking to your own project. I think that's also very
yeah,
important.
I mean, one of the problems of being a printmaker, I've printed for many people, and the problem with being a printmaker is that we have physical equipment, which is an anchor on my ass for the last 35 years. So I have to rent a space, I have to have it there, I have to maintain it, so I can't leave. So in year 2000, I started to say, wait a minute, I want to photograph. So I started with this. When my wife and I went to here, I said, I have to do every scene that I remember. So it's all from what I remembered as a kid. And then I do this other series where work comes to me, and I shoot everything in my space because I can't leave. So it's kind of like therapy for me,
Yeah,
a bit.
yeah. No, I can feel that.
Yeah, it's basically, you know, I don't want to continue with this, but at least it's done.
And done
I don't know if
well.
that makes sense.
And done well. So Diana, you began this series of photographs in 2020, just as the deadly COVID global pandemic began to physically isolate us from each other. And for me, these glimpses of secluded but familiar spaces of your native southern landscape evoke an ethereal quality accomplished through this very soft tonal registration and saturation. Can you speak a little bit about that experience, why you chose these specific places, and
Yeah, I
what
think
was going on with you?
when COVID happened, everything sort of shut down. So my husband and I started hiking a lot, and we have these beautiful state parks and just lots of different gorgeous areas. And I love that so many of these things, they seem untouched, and yet, not very far from a lot of them or cities. You can hear the traffic.
Yeah.
But I just love, because it's so many of those scenes are places that are just really familiar to me, whether they're places that I knew growing up or not. They look like North Carolina to me, and it's just a real sense of place and of home. I don't think there's any place like it. And this looks very Southern to me, which I love. And I think with these sorts of processes too, in my head, people always talk about, oh, what kind of camera do you have? Are you using large format? Are you doing this or that? Clarity has never been a goal for me. So in my head, I have these sort of scenes of how I want these things to look, so the softer they become, the more they're like what I have, the idea that I have in my head. And I think it just sort of makes a connection to the past also for me. Like it's more like a memory,
Right.
rather than actually seeing something yesterday.
Well, as an outside responder to the work, I really had this sense of two things happening simultaneously. One was, it was a way to visualize how can we have safe space, safe air around us during a time of pandemic. But also there was a kind of foreboding that because the scenes that we've shown here are not populated with humans, a kind of, the world without us future, post-human future. So I kind of got both hopefulness and foreboding, I think, from the work.
Yeah, I mean, you can see what it could be. I mean, there's a beauty to all of that, and hopefully it'll stay sort of untouched. And that's what we could have.
I think I'd like to start with Christine for this one. The term alchemy, that is part of the title of this exhibition, invokes, for me anyway, associations of esoteric, pseudoscientific, laboratory practices, of mystical, secretive, transformative actions taking place in isolated laboratories. And you three share a very special identity as modern alchemists yourselves, regarding both the mastery of chemistry and artistic intuition. So Christine, maybe speak a little more about what are you thinking or doing when you're in the studio? And how do you balance intention with experiment?
Oh, that's a tough question. I don't even know where to start. Most days I go in the studio every day by 8:30 and I'm there till 6. And I usually have a game plan. But there's some days I like to experiment. But I usually have, if I'm experimenting, it's expensive. Like we work with expensive stuff.
Yeah,
So I'll usually focus a big chunk of time for experimentation. So I was bleaching a lot recently. Bleaching cyanotypes. Diana, I'm sure, bleaches. And, out of that, it's giving me all these ideas, all right? But, one of my photographs, the juvenile cod up there, I spent weeks experimenting on that photograph. And I wanted to get a certain color of blue. And the base layer is platinum and palladium. And you have to experiment with the exposure time. And my colleagues know that humidity and temperature will affect your exposure time and the tonality, et cetera, et cetera. So you kind of figure out your base layer, and then you're adding, I'm trying to decide, am I going to add the blue pigment with gum bichrome, or am I going to do it with cyanotype, or am I going to add the pigment some other way? And so you experiment, and it took me a while to reach the right tone of blue that I wanted, And I also, then I was experimenting with papers. I was using Japanese papers and ordering papers from all over the world, which, during the pandemic wasn't that easy to do. And experimenting with papers. And I finally land on something that works that I like, okay? And so it may take like several weeks, several months, and sometimes you have to put it away and go back to it.
Are you keeping notes so you can
Yeah,
remember the right way that
Yeah.
you found a solution to something?
Well,
Bob's
Bob's
shaking his head. Bob, what are you doing in the studio? Like, where's your head when you're in this kind of flow state?
Well, I never take notes. Why lie our pants on fire? I have a show I did where I kept the notes only because it's part of the provenance of the show that I did. But I think some of the happy mistakes that happen, I'll take them every day of the week. And I kind of like just keep on going and going and going. And if I make a mistake, I don't lose my mind about it, and I just do it over again. And some of these I printed 5 times until I could figure out how to print this type of work. So, I was amazed with this young lady when she came with me. The wet plate work you did, that 10,000 hours, she got everything. So I think it's a matter of just knowing your confidence in yourself, doing it the way you feel comfortable with, and just do it. I mean, I know how Diana prints, but I don't know how she prints.
So she's going to tell us.
She's
because
going to
I'm
tell
asking
her.
her.
But she
I'm
does
asking her
her printing quite differently than I do, and I'm amazed, but I can only feel confident with what I can do. So, but I don't take notes, that's for sure.
Yes, I always tell my students, you really need to take notes. That's very, very important, but I don't do it myself. I'm an intuitive printer, for sure. I just taught a workshop recently, and somebody said, aren't you going to measure that out? And I said, no.
No.
For me, gum printing in particular, it is so creative, and I think when you start sort of, at least with gum printing, there are certain things you need to know,
Yeah.
but when you start sort of having a checklist, number 1, do this, number 2, do this, number 3, but I think a lot of processes are like that, then you've just taken all the joy out of it,
Right.
and all that creative interpretation is just, and as Christine said earlier, I've been doing this for 15 years, this particular process, and every day I learn something new.
Yeah.
It's astonishing, and I feel like if I just followed these certain guidelines,
You would
I
never
would
learn.
miss all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So it really is the alchemy, because you don't really always know exactly what you're going to get, that there's this tension between intention and intuition,
It's
and you're
wonderful.
feeling your way through
And most
it.
of the times
and
if you-
writing is like that for me, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I think that's, because sometimes if you have a plan in your head, and it doesn't go according to plan, I think it upsets a lot of people, not me. I'm more than happy to take that circuitous route. So,
At a certain point, you forget about the perfect print,
yeah.
and then you say, there's no such thing as a perfect print, and then you learn to accept other people's work, your own work, and you see the possibilities.
Yeah.
And if you can see the possibilities, you become a much better printer, because then you're just printing. I mean, there are basics you have to know, but we all know that, right? But those basics are just there that we know, and then from there, if we make a mistake, like I just finished a bunch of prints this week, and I didn't invert the magenta negative, so I've got the exact opposite color that I wanted. But it actually looks pretty good, so we printed it out. So we continue printing in my facility, even if we know it's a mistake. We take it right to the very bitter end. And then if it's a piece of crap, we rip it up. If it's not, we keep it.
I love that. I'd like to just check with our lovely audience if you have any particular questions that you want to ask any of the artists. If not, I'm just going to keep going. But I know a lot of people are specifically interested in kind of your technical work, as well as the thematic component of your work. So you're very welcome if you want to address any particular question. I'm very interested also in the approach to the framing of the works, and I know Camelia has really done a fantastic job working with many of these prints. I wonder if you would mind coming up and just explaining a little bit about, just come right up and join us.
Diana matted all her pieces beautifully. I think everything very simple and works well with the black rebate. Actually, and not many people do that anymore. A lot of people like to have it clean borders, but it works really well. In case of floating some of the prints, because they're beautiful paper, watercolor paper, and it, all the waves and all the texture and everything comes through when you actually float it in the frame rather than just put them out around it. It actually makes a big difference, like these beautiful pieces.
Well, and Christine, I know you've been experimenting, showing your brushwork. Normally you don't like to do that. But when you have them floating, it really has the sense of a material treasure more than being an image. I know you're experimenting, you're not entirely comfortable with that approach yet.
I'm experimenting, and I like the idea of seeing the edge of the paper. And so even with the mats, in some cases, like this piece, I have a mat, but I'm showing the edge of the paper, and I cut the brush strokes off. In some cases, I have deckled edges, on the edge of the paper. And in other cases, I have mats. So it depends. It depends on the piece and, what your vision is for the piece. And so it never ends.
Thank you. Bob, when you and I met in Toronto in April to discuss this project, I asked a question and I was really surprised about the answer, because I hadn't really thought of it in that way. But a lot of the work in here is really about venerating nature, appreciating it, slow looking and respecting it. And I worried, were all of the chemicals themselves that you're working with antithetical to the clear admiration that you have? And your answer surprised me, so I'm hoping that you'll...
Are you going to talk about rock, stone, water? Yeah.
But you were talking about how it's really not harmful, that the organicity of your materials, in fact, is in harmony with the vision that you have as an artist.
This is actually very important for people to understand that we're working with pigment, which is stone, crushed stone. Then we have palladium in some of our cases, palladium, platinum, which is a noble metal. Then we're working with tree sap, which is gum arabic. So far, 3 natural. Then we have cotton. So all the paper here is cotton. So it's a natural source. Water is the vehicle that everything is washed in, and the bad ugly sister is the ammonium dichromate that we use, which we keep and then we recycle through the city ordinance. The other part about what we do is, you know, if you were, and please, I don't poo-poo inkjet printing, but we have every corner, there's a master printer hitting a button, pounding out thousands and thousands of inkjet prints, which within 80 years all end up in the landfill. None of these prints will ever end up in the landfill if we sell them, if Corey and Chelsea do their job properly. And if they sell them.
I think we'll be editing that.
Yeah. But if they do their job right and sell them to collectors, which all 3 of us are interested in selling to, these pieces have the ability to last 1,000 years. So we're not contributing to landfill. These should be around. I mean, and that's the one thing that really makes me feel good about what we do. The cyanotype gum overs, the palladium, you know, she's working with wet plate tin types. These pieces are not, they're eventually one-offs, and we're not pressing a button doing 100 copies. I mean, my edition is editions of 2. I'm not sure what Diana's is, but I think they're editions of 3. You know, and Christine has low editions, but they're all going to homes. And hopefully they're going to be passed off as collectible, resellable work. And that's the difference between a lot of contemporary work that just goes out there. It's put on walls to show status. Whereas what we do is collectible, and it goes onto the resale market, which I feel is a much more important place to be. And so it goes to the cotton, stone, water, and tree sap is what we're basically using. I don't know.
I love that. I think those are all the questions that I have. I think all 3 of you, really given us a lot more insight into how to approach the works that we have on view here, and how your process is working in the studio and also outside in nature. So I very much appreciate that you've shared your thoughts and experiences today.
Thank you.
Thank you.